Woo! To be the man, you gotta beat the man. Today, we're going back into the archives. We're basically going to be taking a look at an old DVD. This one, of course, is the Ultimate Ric Flair Collection. This is one that was released back in 2003. This one should honestly be in everyone's collection. I can honestly tell you a short story. I just talked about this on a video that I made about a 2003 Triple H versus Ric Flair match that appears on this DVD, because I wasn't watching wrestling on Raw in 2003. I had never seen this before buying this DVD, but I was cruising around Circuit City. Yes, Circuit City back in the day, and came across the Ultimate Ric Flair Collection and decided to pick it up. I had a few wrestling DVDs in my collection at this time. I can remember the NWO and Hulk Rules had come out the year before, and was thinking that this was honestly going to be a Ric Flair documentary, and thought that it was going to be awesome. I can think that this is probably the first multi-disc set that WWE came out with, and was very excited to pick this up. Of course, as everybody knows, you had to wait until the definitive collection, which I can't remember came out after WrestleMania 24 or not, so you had to wait a little while. Of course, everybody, in 2003, we didn't really know how much longer we had of Ric Flair. We had seen him come into the company as the guy who bought Shane and Stephanie's stock so they could buy WCW and ECW and start the invasion angle. And once that was done, before Survivor Series, we basically had Flair come in as the co-owner with Vince McMahon to run the company. Of course, we didn't have Ric Flair, we didn't have Kevin Nash, we didn't have Hulk Hogan, we didn't have Scott Hall, we didn't have Goldberg, we didn't have Scott Steiner. Long list of guys that we didn't have during the invasion, but as soon as the invasion was over, these guys started pouring in. We're going to take a look at this DVD that came out. Very, very cool pictures with Flair and Jim Ross there. We see Flair, to be the man, you gotta beat the man. We see him looking at his NWA championship. This one came with 3 discs. All 3 discs are really cool. There he is. I believe that's Starrcade as being the champion. Already beat Harley Race. I'm not sure what year that is from. I don't think that's 2000. I don't think that's 1992 Ric Flair. But somewhere around that era. And then, of course, there he is on that night in 2003 with Triple H and Bully Ray Dudley toasting him in North Carolina after having the, I don't want to say the comeback match, because he had been wrestling for a little bit, but he had really came back into his own. You know, it was a different Ric Flair. We weren't going to get the Ric Flair of the 80s and 90s, but he was able to go out there and be the Ric Flair that we knew, you know, giving us great matches. We did not get the documentary, like I said. This one just sort of highlights some of Flair's best matches as well as feuds. It goes over his Starrcade 1983 match with Harley Race. With this, you get pre-match and post-match interviews and lots of wrestlers giving their thoughts about what was going on. There we go to Starrcade of 85 against Dusty Rhodes, one of the best Ric Flair, guys that he ever had a feud with back in the day. From here, you see Flair and the Andersons break his ankle. A lot of the stuff that build up to the match. And of course, you get the match as well. One of the really cool things about this, even though there's no documentary, you get a lot of like behind the scenes. I might even sort of relate this to like the Shawn Michaels From the Vault DVD that came out. WWE didn't know what they were really doing back in 2002, 2003. You watch the documentaries, they didn't come out. They didn't know if they wanted to break kayfabe. They didn't know if they wanted to keep kayfabe, if they wanted to, expose certain things like Undertaker, being wrestled to Sarah and what they're like at home. Definitely weird stuff. Everyone changes what their style is. From there we go to Barry Windham, a guy that honestly, could have been one of the best wrestlers of all time. Maybe he didn't have the best feuds, but a lot of people always point to Barry as a guy that maybe didn't get to really show his potential, but did have, big matches. Just wasn't the right guy at the right time, maybe. From there we go to 89 with this feud against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Lots of stuff in there. This was a really cool match. I honestly watched this match when it was on the WWE Network. Top 20 matches on the network. This, of course, comes from Clash of the Champions. I think it was called, like, the Battle of New York or something close to that. But basically, Terry Funk being brought in. I remember that this is one of the greatest. This is from 89, so I think this is... I don't think the WCW became WCW until like 90 or 91, but it was honestly always looked at as one of the greatest WCW matches of all time. The kickoff of hardcore wrestling on mainstream, wrestling, I guess you can say. You get some sort of behind the scenes stuff. They talk about the plane crash. This was honestly the first thing that I ever knew that Ric Flair was in a plane crash back in the day, because I can honestly tell you a lot, like, when somebody said, I'm going to break your neck, I thought if you went down in a plane crash, I didn't think anybody ever lived. So for Flair to survive that and also come back and be the wrestler and have the career that he did is beyond the point of crazy. From here we see Ric Flair coming to his feud that he had behind the scenes with just basically saying that he wasn't going to be able to work in WCW anymore. So he went and worked for Vince. Right off the bat, he becomes the man up there, winning the 1992 Royal Rumble because of the shenanigans of the 1991 Survivor Series, as well as Tuesday in Texas. The title was on the line in the Rumble. Flair wins from the number 3 spot. Then we get some sort of behind-the-scenes stuff. I always like the Real World Heavyweight Champion, where basically Flair was showing off the WCW title, and Jack Tunney was basically saying, we're not going to let you promote WCW. We know where you came from, but that championship is not thought of here, and they would pixelate it out. Not a lot of stuff here on Sting, but when I think of Flair, I always think of the Sting feud as being one of his best feuds. You get the Clash of Champions match there, and of course there's a big huge gap in between this. This is probably from Mean Gene's there, so maybe this is from 94, I would guess. They skipped all the way to 2003. I think you get the final Nitro from 2001. It doesn't look like you get the match, but you get the final promo, where he says it's the end of the era and he's going to turn out the lights on WCW and all that. But Ric Flair and Triple H, it was kind of weird. I didn't know, what set up the match until, honestly, tonight, when I watched it on the WWE Network and watched the full episode of Raw. But, I know if you don't have this in your collection, I would honestly tell you to pick up the definitive collection first, and then probably the Four Horsemen one second. But number 3, the Ultimate Ric Flair collection, definitely deserves to be in anybody's WWE DVD collection.